Okay, good afternoon. Literally just good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. Um, uh, you can see on the slide what you're hopefully joining us for. If you have realized that you're in the wrong space and place, you're very welcome to leave. You're also equally welcome to stay. Because we will be spending the next hour in some very esteemed and inspiring company talking about leadership and specifically that high-performing leadership from self to system. It will be a fun and interactive session, I promise. We are recording it, so if anybody feels uncomfortable about that, please do let us know afterwards, and we'll see what we can do. And we'll be posting the slides and the recording so that everybody has the materials available to us after the event. We've got a lovely crowd. Thank you very much. And I'm sure others will join us as we go. So let me just move us along. So four objectives for today. We're going to share some perspectives on the topic of what leadership actually is, and very specifically, what it exists to create. So, what are the tasks of leadership? We're going to explore a new leadership model that proposes five conditions that characterize leadership, four roles that leaders fulfill, and four spaces where it turns up or should turn up. We're going to have some lessons and advice from some wonderful NHS leaders who are currently navigating the challenges of leadership in today's health and care in the widest sense environment. And then we're going to create some space for making connections to others. I'm sure you will hopefully all have spotted someone that you recognize in the participant list. And if not, then just pick someone at random and drop a message in chat and say hello. The agenda is cunningly designed to respond to those objectives. We're going to be hearing primarily from three leaders, and then we're going to have a discussion and an opportunity for some Q&A in the chat, and then we're going to come to some closing reflections. And what we do want you to leave with is a sense of feeling a little bit lighter and energized and stimulated about your own leadership journey, about leadership journeys that you're supporting others through. Good news. We're not be asking you to come off a mute unless you're one of the speakers. Please, though, if you've got any comments, thoughts, reflections, just pop them in the chat. We'll be giving you a chance to use Menti as well. I mentioned recording. I know hashtagging is slightly old school, but then I am old. If you would be so obliged, do hashtag trace leadership. No longer on X, rightly so. No judgment for anybody is, I should say. Not really. Blue Sky and LinkedIn. Please, we're keen to get a conversation started. If there's anything you want to share after the event, drop us a line. And if your technology is not working, the wonderful Whispering Pete Chalice, our colleague here at Kaleidoscope, is here with us in the background. If you're really struggling and turning it on and turning it off again doesn't work, drop Pete a line and we'll do our best to get you reconnected. But if all else fails, we will make the recording and the slides available. I am Shane Carmichael. I'm part of the team here at Kaleidoscope Health and Care. I look after our leadership and OD practice with my colleague Katie Goulding, who you'll be hearing from. For those of you who don't know who Kaleidoscope are, we're a social enterprise. We're a not-for-profit consultancy. We are humble, but we also are award-winning. One from the HSJ and one from the Market Research Society. We don't have a trophy cabinet, but if we get a chance, we might build a small one. What do? We exist to help organise achieve greater impact. We're really interested in how to create real change with real people. So we talk a lot about change that works, and we do that in three ways. We help clients we work with think about where they're heading through good strategy. We help them move forward through organizational development and help them understand the difference they're making in the world through insights and impact. I should say that our wider mission is to create a world of work that is kinder, more joyful, and more connected. That's what really matters to us. We do that in our work and through our work, and hopefully today we'll make a small contribution to that wider mission. So, enough about us. More interestingly, who you'll be hearing from. I'm delighted to be joined by a stellar panel of speakers. I will allow them to introduce themselves in turn. So you'll be hearing from Katie, Sheila, and Andy, who'll be sharing their perspectives on all things leadership. Now, we are going to invite you to follow us into the world of Menti. So, for those of you not familiar with Menti, you can either go to menti.com and enter that code, or for the tech savvy, you can scan the QR code, and that should take you to the same place. So I'll just leave that up for a little second. And then my wonderful colleague Katie is going to take over screen sharing and is going to bring us into Menti, where we've got two questions. And we're asking you these to just provide a little bit of stimulation for what is about to follow. So Katie, whenever you feel ready and able, if you want to bring up the Menti screens. You are wonderful. So, question one. If Leadership in Health and Care was a movie, it is Oscar and BAFTA season, so if that was a title of the movie, what would the audience be shouting at the screen? There is no filter on these responses, so I ask you to use your discretion. Don't go out there alone. Don't do it. We are going to talk about this idea of loneliness and leadership as a solo pursuit. And we are going to talk about why are people drawn to it when rationally it might not feel like something that is a wise choice. Are we listening? I love that. Keep going. You're amazing. For anyone who is out there leading, thank you, thank you, thank you. It is a love act. And we appreciate you. So some of these things are now being grouped. Very interesting. So we have got a sense of a bit of repetition, wanting to be listened to, needing support. How can you cast? How were you cast in this role? Very good. That's a good question. Sheila and Andy, we are going to ask you how you were cast in this role. Was that by design or was it by accident? We won't ask you who would play your body double. That's we'll leave that for a private conversation. I love that. Where is everybody? Which links to that idea of support. Thinking about the long term, very interesting. This constant tension of being torn between serving the short term and the political pressures that come with that, and serving the long term, which is where the political direction seems to be pushing us towards yet. Oh my God, look, it's hard. Good luck, rather you than me. Again, coming back to this idea of, this is not an insignificant thing to step into. Why do you keep doing this? Sheila and Andy, you can respond to that if you wish. You're a hero, but you shouldn't need to be a hero. I love that. I think there's something very profound about why do we expect and invite and then get disappointed and punish the idea of a heroic leader. Okay, and then why haven't they learned from the past? I think that's a really interesting question, an interesting challenge. Why do some leaders who we experience feel either unable or unwilling to learn from the past? And what's really going on there? Is that a systemic challenge, or is that something that is prevalent to a particular type or style of leadership? Okay. Katie, if you can move us on to the next question. Loving what we're shouting at the screen. It's a very noisy cinema. Okay, so what is your favorite leadership model or definition? So what's the thing, model, framework, definition that you tend to lean into, draw on, find yourself waving at people, even sometimes members of your family, if you're like me? What works for you? Okay, so the idea of journey, yeah, we're going to talk about that. Bringing people along and enabling that journey. Distributing leadership, yeah. Compassion, I'm sure it's going to turn up. Leading from the back, very interesting. Let's see, trust, empowerment, service leaders. Lencioni's five dysfunctions. Katie, was that you typing, or is that someone in the crowd? We are obsessed with Lencioni's five dysfunctions. Very interesting work for anyone who's interested in team leadership, pace setting, absolutely, while leading with humility. Covey circles of control. We also love that. I think that's so important. If you haven't come across Covey circles of control, influence, and concern, please step into it. It's a great way to find a sort of a way to rethink about what's possible, what's available to us in what can often feel a world where we have no power and we have no control. And just taking some time to think about that can be very, very helpful. Knowing yourself, we are going to talk about that. Thank you very much. And yes, to Clora's work on social leadership. Direction, alignment, commitment. So that's the DAC model from the Centre for Creative Leadership, if I'm not mistaken. Big shout out to our colleagues there. Simon Stenik, yeah, start with why. Lovely. So again, we will share all of these with you so that you can add these to your own library. Brilliant, Katie. Thank you so much for taking over screen sharing. I will now grab that back and hope this has worked seamlessly. Okay, so having enjoyed that little bit of stimulation, I'm going to pass over to my colleague Katie. And Katie, the first question is, what are you shouting at the cinema screen?
Well, I really enjoyed a lot that were on there. I was interested in there's someone on there that was a similar thought as me, which was around It's Behind You. I was quite drawn to the person who wrote I can't suspend disbelief any further. Um, but I'm really grateful for the people who put some kind of really like championing comments there as well, because I think to be a leader in the NHS is no mean feat, and we should celebrate leaders and recognise the weight that our leaders across the NHS carry too. So it was nice to see those. Shane, I think that my task is to take a few minutes just to share a little bit about the work that we do at Kaleidoscope around leadership, and share a little bit about how we are thinking at the minute around how to lead and how to lead well in a often quite ambiguous, often quite turbulent, very changing NHS context. So the first couple of slides are just kind of a bit of context setting. And we have the privilege of working right across the country with a whole raft of great organisations around leadership. And we're really proud to do that. I want to point out that Kent and Medway Mental Health NHS Trust is on there as well. We'll be hearing from Sheila in a little while. And it has been a great honour to work with them. And everything that we do is inspired and underpinned by industry and academic best practice. So I'm now going to work through every one of these bullet points in order and no, I'm not, because there is so much research, there is so much data out there. You guys said yourselves when we started to put models and frameworks in, there must have been a dozen or more that were on there just from this group of people today. And sometimes it can feel a little bit like there's so much out there you don't know where to start. And one of the things that we like to do at Kaleidoscope is take it back to be as simple as it possibly can be, and kind of try and bring the essence of it all together into one space. And so we've been working with what we have named the TRACE leadership model. I cannot begin to tell you the joy on Shane's face when he worked out that we could use the acronym TRACE. And it's important because it makes it easy to remember, right? What have I got to do as a leader? I need to kind of think about how I am tracing a path, or I am tracing the way forward. One of the things that we find when we work with leadership teams is that leadership can sometimes be quite a destabilizing place. It can sometimes be difficult to understand exactly what it is that we need to do, what's our role, what's our place, what's the task, what does success look like for us as leaders. And you may have seen in some of our comms about the event today, the HSJ publication around the 25% of leadership churn and turnover, and this sense that leaders sometimes have to fall on their sword. And I think sometimes if we can simplify the ask and we can make clear what is needed to be successful in leadership, maybe we could steady the ship a little bit for people. So we try to keep things simple, and we have tried to set out 5 things that actually we believe that great leadership does. We believe that great leaders are able to set the task and define for themselves, for their teams, for their organizations, for their systems, the thing that needs to be achieved. They're able to then determine the best route to success, so they can cut through all of the many different options and various ways of achieving the outcome, actually set a really clear pathway to success. They're able to align plans, align resources, align relationships, and align incentives to make sure that you've got what you need around you, and your team have got what they need around them to be able to be successful in their work. They consciously and systematically build capability for themselves, for their team, for their systems, and they focus and give energy to building energy, building engagement, building excitement. You guys work in such a hard space. It's easy to feel downtrodden. It's easy to feel like there's yet another challenge you need to overcome as a team. And the role of this, for me, I think one of the most important roles of a leader is being able to keep that energy and keep that hope and keep that forward motion and momentum. So 5 things that we believe at Kaleidoscope are really important things for leaders to do. We also know that to do that, you need to play different roles. I'm not going to go through all of the detail of this right now, but sometimes as a leader, you need to take on the role as an architect. Sometimes you need to take on the role as a composer in creating alignment. Sometimes, particularly around building capability, your job is to coach, and other times it's to champion. And sometimes it's easy to think that there's only one role that you need to play as a leader, but that's not how life works. Sometimes your teams need you to set direction. Other times they need you to coach. Sometimes they need you to create something, and other times they just need you to champion them to create it for themselves. And the skill of a leader is working out, like, what role do I need to play right now? So we've got 5 tasks, we've got 4 different roles, and last of all, there's 4 different spaces. So one of the things that I'm proud of in this model and resonates with the people that we work with is that actually those 5 things and 4 roles, they work when you're leading self, they work when you're leading team, they work when you're leading organization, and they work when you're leading in the system. And so the challenge for us as leaders is to think about how can we be consistent in embracing the trace activities in all of the spaces that we find ourselves in, and keeping it really simple. What am I doing here? Am I setting the task? Am I making the route clear? Am I creating alignment, building capability? What is it I'm doing in this space at this time, and what role do I need to play in that? So that's a little bit from us about how we are thinking about leadership in the current context and practice, and we will share this with you afterwards. So thank you, Shane.
Lovely, Katie. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Delighted to have with us the very amazing Sheila Stenson, who is CEO down at Kent and Medway. Sheila, again, thank you for being with us. Over to you. And first of all, of course, no escape. If Leading and Leadership in Health and Care was a movie, what are people, or what are you shouting at the screen? And then really in your hands to take us on your journey.
Thanks, Shane, and it's great to be here and meet everyone as well. So thanks for asking me. But I did think, what would I be saying? And I'd probably be thinking, stop, pause, and reflect. If that's just it's the reflection piece, I think sometimes as leaders in the NHS that we absolutely need. And that was coming up as people were putting things onto the chat. So yeah, absolutely, that's what I'd be thinking.
And Sheila, over to you. Just we're glad to have you here. Just tell us a little bit about your journey into leadership, how you experience leadership. Do any of those sort of tasks or role types resonate? And What are you thinking about in terms of leadership and in health and care, thinking about the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Shane. And as you said at the beginning, so intro to me, I'm the Chief Exec at Kenton Medway Mental Health Trust and have been since November 2023. And actually, just a little bit about me. So I've been in the NHS just 24 years, a couple of days ago, which I absolutely love and have been in it since I left university. I would say as I made the decision to step up to chief exec, which was just over 3 years ago now when I applied for the post, it was a big decision for me. Because actually I was leaving behind my 20 plus year career as a finance professional. And I knew I had a really strong identity. So you're thinking about some of the things you were saying, Katie, as well, and Shane in your intro. I had a very strong identity as me, as Sheila, as the chief finance officer. And somebody put in the chat something about knowing yourself, and I felt confident I knew myself. But actually, I got presented with this fantastic opportunity to, lead and be the chief exec of an organisation I absolutely love. And I should say, before I worked for the organisation I work for now, my whole career had been in the acute sector within the NHS. So actually in kind of hospitals, very different. It wasn't mental health, but I've completely fell in love with the mental health sector and look every day thinking about the impact I can have and what a difference I can make for our patients, and that's what drives me. But I really had to consider, how I, as a leader, were going to take them 20 plus years I had as a strong finance person and think about how all my skills I had as a leader were going to be effective if I was going to become a chief exec. And I think it was important for me to recognise that I was no longer going to be, as I would say, a subject matter expert, which I absolutely felt I was. And stepping into a CEO role, I think it's fair to say you don't feel like you're a subject matter expert in anybody or anything because your team are the subject matter experts, but you're that person that's leading that team to make sure, the team thrives and is really clear around how they're driving that organization forward. So I had to kind of get that in my head around kind of, what does that mean for me and my identity again? And how was I going to transition from being the finance director that people knew, and I've been doing that job for 6+ years, into the chief exec of the organization and what that kind of meant. So I just wanted to kind of share that because actually there's a big part of round as well becoming the CEO, which is you feel quite public very often. So you're the front of the organisation, you're the face of the organisation, aren't you? And actually staff recognise you wherever you are. I had someone that came up to me the other day when I was visiting a service and said, "Oh, Sheila, it's really nice to meet you. I haven't actually met you before, but I saw you with your dad at the hospital." And I thought, he said, "You must have been taken in for an appointment." It made me just think, wow, you really are that public face. You could be anywhere that people will actually pick you out as well. So I think it was that whole thing that I had to really think about when I was making the decision to step up. So and kind of I really resonate with what Katie was saying around the different models and the role of a leader and how you have to really think about at what point you want to be more directive, at what point you're absolutely just going to empower the team and the wider organisation. And it's that balance of trying to think about getting that right, which we're not, we're human, we're not always going to get it right, but you have to do your kind of absolute best. But for me, there are things that have really driven me in my leadership journey about who I am. And the first one I would say is about being authentic and actually being who you are. So I've talked a little bit about already stepping into the role of chief exec, but actually what was going through my head as I was doing that and as I was applying for the post was, who is Sheila then going to be as the chief exec? And I had to kind of step back from that and say, actually, I just want to be me. And I think that's really, really important, that actually what I bring to the organisation is just me. And I didn't need to be my predecessor. I didn't need to be anybody else that I'd seen and admired as a chief exec. It was important that I was just myself. And it took me a while to get my head around that, but I kind of got there as I was going through the kind of process as well for the job. But actually, the bit that pleases me the most now is when I'm out and about and I spend a lot of time visiting services. Staff often say to me, "Well, you're just really normal, Sheila, aren't you?" And I always say to them, "I'm just a normal person. I'm just another person." And that's, I take that as positive. I absolutely do, that they can relate to me and I can relate to them. And actually, we did a big piece of work when I came into post about resetting who we were, our identity, and thinking about the values for the organisation. And the one behind me, which is curious, was something that came out of all of the engagement we did with staff and our stakeholders about kind of resetting our values. But this one, staff often very relate to me and say, "You're really curious, Sheila." And it's interesting that actually what staff wanted was a more curious organisation. So actually, it's a value that I'm really kind of proud of, and one that staff really resonate, but it's something that I absolutely know that I am as a leader as well, which I think links to kind of being authentic. The second one for me is absolutely about being, kind of integrity. I'm always upfront, I'm always open and honest about kind of what's going on with, in the organisation, in the wider system, how I'm managing stakeholders. And that's been really critical to me as a leader throughout my kind of whole career, but even more now as kind of chief exec. And sometimes it's hard when you've got to call things out. When I first came into post, I had to really call out quite quickly, which wasn't easy, which was, I know there's racism happening in our organisation. I'm just going to call it out as your new chief exec because we're going to deal with it. And it was about being really upfront with staff. And it's really important, I think, that you do that. And for me as well, it's really important that you're aware of the politics and you can handle them as well that might go on for any chief exec or any leader within the NHS. But I'm definitely, open and honest with staff and kind of stakeholders at all times. It's fundamental. It's what kind of drives me. And, I've got a paper that's going to our board tomorrow that's going to be really open about where we are around some of the concerns we have around quality and safety in the organisation. And it's a public document, but it's important to be public to have that conversation because we're here to serve the public. And, I need to provide them with assurance that we're doing things about kind of some of the things that have come out of the kind of recent inspections we've had as part of the Care Quality Commission. So I just kind of share that because actually it's managing that as well, and being able to kind of just think about how we front that as leaders, because that's our role, and that's okay, but sometimes it will feel really difficult, but it's just thinking about how we kind of manage that for ourselves as well. And most recently, my team were absolutely thinking about the good things because there are many that happen in the organisation and about how we respond to some of that. And I was only just sharing with Katie the other day and Shane when we were talking about this session, which is there was something we was going to push from a comms point of view, and it came to me and I kind of looked at it and was like, I'm really not happy with this. I think we're pitching it I know we're trying to be positive, but too positive. So actually, let's not do this at this moment in time. And I think actually it's just about holding on to that integrity at all times. There's the right time to push things in a positive story, but actually sometimes you just got to balance that with what else is going on. I think thirdly for me, and I've talked about values already, is about open communication and values, and I kind of linked them together. So I think Katie said about being clear around direction and where we're going, which is what I actually try to do on a daily basis, and be really strong around communication, whether that's with my team, whether that's with the wider organisation. And somebody put in the chat about connecting with the front line, and I actually was going to say this. So my biggest thing is about I want to be a chief exec that connects with the front line, hence why I do lots of visits out in services and I know what's going on, because that's going to enable me to lead the organisation in a better way and take us in the direction that we need to go to. So I completely agree with the listen to the front line more. There is definitely the thing about inclusive, hence wanting to connect to the front line, because if I'm going to do a good job, I've got to include the rest of the organisation in what I do. And there's that whole board to board connection we talk about all of the time, which is really important. And I recently did an interview for an IP company, actually, and it just got published in the last few days. And the kind of headline, which made me smile, was about not wanting to be a picture on the wall, because that's what I'd said, which is I didn't want to be a CEO that was just a picture on the wall. I wanted to be somebody that was out there that people knew and could relate to, and communicated well. And they knew that I had really strong values, which another one of our values is inclusive. So actually, as a leader, values are really important to me. But I think for me, at the heart of this is treating people about how you want to be treated yourself. And, for me, that's around kind of respect and kindness. And it's something that kind of guides me every single day. And I would say the fourth and final thing before I kind of finish is about collaboration, which is what Katie was alluding to in the kind of four spaces. And we've had the delight of working with Kaleidoscope and developing our bespoke kind of leadership training, which uses them for kind of spaces. And for me as a leader, being able to influence the wider system that I work in kind of the NHS is really, really important. And me thinking about my organisation as part of that wider system. And only part the other day, as part of our exec away day that we have on a quarterly basis that Katie supports us with, we were really kind of thinking with my wider exec team about organisation first. So what does that mean for us? And why is that so important? Because if we put our organisation first and everything that we're doing and the patient, it's always going to drive us to collaborate in the way we need to with the wider system. And think about how we need to influence so we do the right thing for our patients. And, that mental health is as kind of, talked about and has a voice in the system as much as the acute sector might have, for example. So I think collaboration is really, really important. And one final thought I just wanted to leave with people, which I often say to my team or the wider kind of leadership team, when things are tough, because yes, they can be at times, absolutely. I always say, which is actually when it's really busy, we need to have that time to reflect and step back. But actually, I always say to people, it is what it is, but it is what you make it. And that drives me as a leader because I think actually it can be tough. But actually, how do we step back and take that time to think about what are we going to do differently here and how we're going to improve care for our patients? And I always think that is in our gift. So I'll pause there, Shane, but that's just some of my reflections around leadership.
Sheila, thank you so much. Loads to pick up there when we come back to discussion. But thanks a billion. Really stimulating. I've been making multiple notes here. Okay, from one perspective to another. So delighted to have Andy Knox with us. Andy is a GP. He's an interim medical director at the Lancashire and South Cumbria ICB. He also is an academic, and a few years ago was awarded an MBE for his services to population health. So delighted to have Andy with us. Andy, over to you.
Thanks very much, Shane. And Sheila, that was stellar. That was just beautiful. And Katie, hearing the Thrive model as well. I love the Thrive model so much. And I think what you guys at Kaleidoscope are doing right now is really exciting in presenting that as a model to help us think through kind of leadership frameworks. I really resonate with so much of it. So have I got to answer that first question as well about what would I be shouting at the screen? You on it?
That is the most important question.
That's the most important question. Today, I do quite a lot of shouting at screens. Sometimes when I'm on mute, but also when I'm on the TV watching all of the box sets I'm into. I'm watching Blue Lights at the moment. Oh my goodness, it's such a show. If you don't watch Blue Lights on the BBC, absolutely phenomenal. Anyway, I think I was shouting a few things at the screen. One is don't give up. Another was leave them alone and let them get on with it. Because sometimes it feels like as leaders, there's so many asks and pressures coming at us all the time. Actually, some of the stuff that we know would make the biggest difference, sometimes we feel kind of handcuffed and we can't actually get on and do it because we're always having to answer more and more questions or be under more and more of the spotlight. And sometimes you want a bit more space created for you to just get on and do it. And I think the other thing I'd say is look behind you. And what I mean by that is focus on the people who you're really forgetting about or who you're missing. So a huge amount of my work in kind of medical leadership and in population health is really focused on social justice, which is a huge driver for me, really. I have a massive love for people and communities, and particularly for those who are forgotten or left behind or who we turn a blind eye to or we don't focus on. And I like to bring those people sharp into our focus, because actually, if you look at what's driving pressure in health and care right now, it's the people in our society who are most forgotten and left behind. It's people who live in poverty and who experience significant inequity every single day, whether that's racial, through significant ingrained racism in our society, whether it's through poverty, whether it's through misogyny, whether it's through homophobia. There are so many communities who we forget about or who we have not brought sharp enough into our focus. And actually, it costs us as leaders to forget them, because it's actually what drives pressure and causes us to miss our targets and causes us to have tons of people lining up to corridors of our acute trusts or in ambulances outside REDs, or rotating through the doors of our mental health capacity. So yeah, that's what I would be shouting at the screen. And my leadership journey is multifaceted, I guess, and complex. It's been it certainly hasn't been a straight line. And I think I was reflecting on probably the biggest change in my perspective on leadership was back in about 2010, 2011, when I went on some training down in Bristol with an amazing group called The Art of Hosting. And it totally transformed my whole view of what leadership is, really, and has completely changed the way that I lead as a result. And really, it's about framing leadership as hospitality rather than heroism. So leaders, for me, are not people who ride in on white horses trying to fix things, but people who learn to hold space for collaborative, participative, inclusive conversations where we bring our best energy and wisdom into a space around really knotty and really complex problems, and everyone gets to contribute to be part of the solution together. And I think if we can do our work around hospitality, and The Art of Hosting teaches something called the fourfold practice, which I love and have really taken on, which is how do you host yourself as a leader? So taking responsibility for who you are and how you show up. And I think there's something really big about really doing our internal work. So I've had years and years of therapy. I come from a really traumatic background. I could tell you a whole story about kind of my growing up, but actually I have to take responsibility for who I am and how I deal with that and how it spills out of me and my interior world, and how that kind of helps me or doesn't help me show up in various leadership spaces. So I think there's something about learning to host yourself as a leader and take responsibility for who you are and doing your work. So I really love something Pep Guardiola says, that if you want to play great football, you don't focus on the wins and the losses, you focus on the quality of human being that you've got on and off the field. And I think we focus far too much on the work on and off the field and trying to win and lose things, but we don't focus on the quality of human being that we've got playing the game. And I really, really care about the quality of human being that we have showing up to work every day in the world of health and care. And so for me, actually having personal therapy and having a personal coach all of the time is like super important. So hosting myself. The second thing is then learning to be hosted by others. And I think this is where the work of curiosity and humility really comes in. So I love what Sheila had to say about curiosity. I think curiosity and humility are our two most important gifts in leadership. One is because we don't know everything, and the other is we've got to be willing to be changed ourselves. And that's why we've got to learn to be hosted by others. So I spoke at this interesting faith conference the other day. Like, we had the faith sector part of our CFSE across Lancashire and South Cumbria the other day. And we were talking about kind of the role that the faith sector plays. And someone opened up with the story of the Good Samaritan and how we learn to love our neighbour. And I think actually it's the person who's most different to us, the person who we most despise, the person who we most look down on, who's the person we most need to learn to love. And we need to learn to receive their hospitality. So I deliberately every Friday go spend time in communities or with people who I don't know, who probably scare me a bit, who make me feel uncomfortable, who make me change my perspective, who make me be across difference. And I want to learn, and I want to be curious, and I want to be humble. I want to receive their hospitality. I want to be brave enough to get things wrong and say clumsy things and learn and be changed in that process. And I think that only happens not when I've got the power to invite people into my space, but when I deliberately get out of my boardroom with my posh suit on and put on some jeans and a hoodie and go and sit in a circle of recovering heroin addicts, or a circle of sex workers, or with maybe some of the Muslim community in a local mosque, or with like whoever, people whose lives are just not like mine, and that I get to be changed in the process of those relationships and learn how we are completely missing the mark so often in leadership in the NHS or in care for those people. So the second is learn to be hosted by others. Don't always make it about you inviting people into your space. The third is then how we learn to host, how we learn to be great hosts. How do we actually invite people in well and be inclusive and participative and create spaces where we can grapple with the really fundamentally complex, difficult questions that we have to face together? And how do we solve those knotty, wicked issues that we've been battling with for years, in which everyone can feel safe to be part of the contribution, and it's a psychologically safe environment in which actually no idea is stupid, no one's going to be ridiculed, no one's going to be put aside, but actually we learn to develop and process ideas and thoughts together. And then the fourth thing is then how we learn to host with others. So in integrated spaces, how do we learn to do this with our council friends, with our CVFSE or VCFSE colleagues, or with the police, or with fire service, or with whoever we need to, with private sector? How are we going to host together with? And I think that's particularly true in our neighbourhoods. How do we create environments in neighbourhoods where people across different organisations are creating together with leadership, not one leading more than another, but we really create those kind of really collaborative team things. And so I've got a saying, which is, don't be a cock, be a chicken. I think we've got far too many cocks in leadership, and I think we see that at the global scale politically right now, and I think we see it across lots of different sectors of our society. I'm so tired of people who turn up strutting in, thinking they know everything, like talking down to people, crowing about how amazing they are, like just trying to rule the roost. That leadership is not getting us to where we need to be. We need collaborative leadership. And for me, chicken stands for leadership that is curious, leadership that is humble, leadership that is inclusive, leadership that's compassionate, leadership that's kind, leadership that's empowering. And the reason I use that word is I had a bit of a debate with Helen Bevan about this, because she says actually it's not about empowering people, it's about helping people recognize they've got autonomy and accountability to act. And I think that's absolutely true. And what I've learned again and again in my work with some of our most disadvantaged communities across the north of England, or whether we're talking about in our own teams, there is something about, as a leader, you do empower others to know that they've got responsibility and power to act. And so I think it's both and. And then the last bit of chicken is nourishment. We've got to create in beautifully pastoral environments in which people feel properly nurtured and nourished to be able to do their work, become their best selves, and continually kind of bring that into a leadership dynamic. And so the last thing I'd say is I unashamedly talk about love. I think I do my work because I love people. I love our communities. I love what we're trying to do together. I think that we sometimes make work too professional and not relational enough. That doesn't mean there's not a professional aspect. It's got to be professional in terms of HR stuff. Sometimes if we try and be too pally, we can get ourselves in trouble. But I think I'm unashamedly want to talk about love as a leader, and the kind of how we build a society much more based on love. What would our education system be like if it was based on love rather than targets? What would our healthcare system really be like if we put love back at the core of it? What would our politics and our economics be like if it was motivated by love rather than power, or by number sheets or whatever? And so I think there's something about putting love back into the heart of how we think about and do leadership together. And all of those other beautiful frameworks like the Thrive model then enable us to bring our best selves to the fore and to be transformative in the way that we lead. I'm going to leave it there. I hope that's helpful, Shane.
Super helpful, Andy, and thank you again, just very much, and for both of you, just for your honesty in sharing a lot of that stuff with us. I should say, and I promise, it was not a condition of Andy coming to join us today, but it's difficult to see this with the blurry background. But I am sort of holding a copy of Andy's book. It's called Sick Society. The strapline being "Our Society is Lovesick." It's a wonderful book, very inspiring, and I think you can find it at most online bookstores near you. So definitely worth a read. I'm sort of left slightly dumbstruck about where to sort of start. So I'm gonna go for a big question. I'm just going to name this. We are drawn to people like you because, to Andy's challenge, we resonate with what you're saying. So there's an interesting question for us as an organization about, whether we should be inviting perhaps colleagues, leaders who maybe are a bit sort of different, but we're drawn to you, and people who are attending are drawn almost certainly to the kinds of leadership and the kinds of characteristics that you're describing. And yet what we see and what we experience and what we saw from the HSJ study on turnover is that the kinds of behaviors that you're describing often feel dissonant with the behaviors that either seem to be rewarded in whatever way you want to describe that, or are sustainable. And I'm just wondering how do you sit with that, dissonance? What might you say to people who are here today who want to lead in those ways, who want more of that kind of leadership, but that's being squeezed out for good reasons and sometimes not? Andy, you go and then I'll come to Sheila.
I was going to ask, please, can we take down the photo? That's all I wanted to say. This captain, that's better.
There we go. We can share the misery, Andy.
I'm going to let Sheila go first. I reckon she's going to have better wisdom than me on this.
Oh, it's a deep question, though, isn't it? I like that, Andy, though. Thanks. I think, and I hear what you're saying, Shane. I suppose for me, I think we've just got to, you're right. There's that whole thing, and I feel it, first time CEO. And then you look at the headlines from the HSJ just the week before last around how many first time CEOs there are. I think for me, it's about having, I talked about it, didn't I? Just being authentic to myself. That's what drives me every single day. If I'm getting it wrong, I think I've got enough self-reflection that I'll go, actually, let's step back from this. I need to do this differently. So I think it's that inner confidence as well, isn't it? Which is actually, I want to lead like this, and this is how I'm going to lead my organisation, and this is how I'm going to show up every single day, knowing it sits with me okay. I'm sure someone will tell me if it doesn't sit with them okay. And I had a very challenging meeting the other day that I was out with a group of counsellors around where we're going as an organisation. But actually, I still felt confident to go to that meeting and be able to address their concerns, but still show up as me and be, this is what I'm doing and this is what I'm kind of telling you as CEO. So I do think there's that inner confidence you need to have. I suppose I link that to kind of resilience as well, because I think sometimes if you read the headlines too much, that can get in your head as well, can't it? So there is something about how you've just got to be really kind of confident and have that resilience in yourself and have the right people around you, that you can take that time to reflect. And I think Andy talked about it. I've got a coach. She's absolutely brilliant. I've had the same coach for a number of years. But actually, I also know if I need an out, because these jobs can be lonely jobs, I can go to her and have a conversation, but also my wider network of chief execs that I feel like I can share. And we might say, this is what I'm experiencing, what are you experiencing? So I think there are a number of things, but I think actually the whole thing around, as you said, kind leadership, it's what drives me, which drives me and what spurs me on, which is I'm just going to be myself. And actually the chair of the ICB said to me, Sheila, you never kind of apologise for showing up and being yourself. And I thought, actually, no one had ever said that to me before. And I thought, actually, he's really right. I don't. And I thought, actually, I took that as a positive when he said that. And I thought, actually, because I do hear people and I reflect on anything that people give me as feedback. But yeah, I think I'm driven by just being that kind. As I talked about kindness, didn't I, and respect when I was talking, and I think that drives me. So I'm happy to hold that as kind of where I am as an individual.
Thank you, Sheila. I think there's something said about integrity. Someone once told me about in integrity you can find freedom. So if you're aligned on, the Zoroastrians used to talk about this, good thoughts, good deeds, good actions. If we feel aligned, that does bring freedom, but it does bring it does require an inner confidence and does require some bravery. Andy, can I ask you a sort of slight separate question, because I want to use this just at the time really wisely. Both of you said one of the things that matters to you is getting out, meeting people, being curious, asking questions. How do you manage the very real tension of listening, taking things on board, seeking out other opinions, and managing the expectations of what's possible to do? I'm just really interested in how you hold integrity while also holding that can be quite a delicate balance. Andy.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great question. And I think it comes actually exactly back to what Sheila's been talking about, which is about authenticity and integrity. So listening, in the process of listening, right, I guess I'm not listening without like I'm putting everything aside. I'm listening with, I'm still turning up authentically as me and kind of with some understanding of what I maybe think I understand already. And I'm really listening about Where's the dissonance? What's the stuff in me that needs to be challenged? Or where are we getting stuff wrong? But also maybe I'm curious about where are the misunderstandings, or where are the things that people I'm listening to might have a completely different perspective on what's possible within the constraints of what we're trying to do. And I really just believe in like proper honesty in conversation together in and with our communities and with our staff. So, you know, there'll be times when people maybe bring assumptions into a room or bring perspectives into a room, which sometimes are like super helpful and really challenge you. And sometimes as you're listening with curiosity, you're like, oh, okay, there's a real misunderstanding here, or there's a different worldview, or there's a different ideology at work. And I really love opening up conversations with quite a lot of curiosity around that. I'm interested where that comes from, or where those perspectives sit or lie. And sometimes our role as leaders, I think, is to untangle some of that, or to offer different perspectives, or to be able to converse and have conversations. Like, I watch leaders who do that really well. I think Andy Burnham's brilliant at that, by the way. Like some of the way that he goes across Manchester and just really listens to communities. But it's not like he puts his leadership aside and forgets what he thinks or knows. He also knows who he is and what he believes and what's important to him. You know, it's like some of the debates right now around I don't know, like some of the stuff that's spouted in the press, or some of the stuff that it might even be becoming a bit of a majority view about asylum seeker and refugee communities. I'm not, as a leader, going to go and sit in a circle and listen to people spout racist ideology, or like say really horrific things about beautiful people within our communities. I'm also going to use some of that voice to challenge, or to bring a different perspective, or to lead with love, and to call out stuff that's not acceptable. So I think there's a both and. There's an ambidextrousness always to leadership, and there's something about staying true to our values and being authentic and having integrity, not over-promising. So there's stuff where do I need to learn and where do I need to change, but also where do I need to lead and be and demonstrate the change. Or ask for or bring a bit of challenge and different value. So my dog's barking because the postman's arrived and he needs to warn the whole neighbourhood.
That's lovely, and I do like this. I think that idea of being ambidextrous. Someone talks, I really respect, talks a lot about bilingual leadership as well. That you're able to speak the language of the service, the system, and you're able to speak the language of the people who we serve. It's really interesting. I'm going to ask you both a question. I'm conscious of our time, but someone has put this in chat that triggered about, do you have to lead differently in different roles? So Sheila, interested in, do you have to lead differently? Did you have to lead differently? Oh, sorry, somebody's on, so I think someone's come off mute. I don't know if that, there we go. It sounded interesting though. Sheila, did you feel you have to lead differently as a CFO and a CEO? I'm also going to ask a big question, which is, do you feel you have to lead differently as a woman in a senior role? And Andy, I'm interested in, do you have to lead differently as a GP than a medical director for an ICB? So we'll go Sheila first, and then Andy.
I saw the question in the chat and it made me smile, actually, because I thought, what a great question. So actually, I'd still stand by, I was always my authentic self, absolutely. But I'm in such a different role now to being the finance director of an organisation. And actually, I've really felt that when I became the CEO of the same organisation, that staff wanted to talk to me about such different things that they wanted to talk to me about when I wore the CFO badge. But I think stayed true to myself around being authentic. But I think there's something about my confidence and growth that I talked about when I was talking earlier, which is actually I kind of in my head found my way of kind of, I'm going to be as chief exec and I've got to be confident in that space to hold that space, because actually people are going to recognise me across the organisation often and want to talk to me. So actually, I think I absolutely feel I'm probably more confident as a leader now, as CEO, than I was as CFO. But you're absolutely right, Shane, because that's the other point I was going to say. when I was CFO, I was in a very male-dominated environment. So actually, I think the stats haven't changed that much. It's about 27% are female CFOs compared to the CFO network within the NHS. So actually, it felt a very different environment to be in. And when I was the CFO for the organisation I'm still part of now, I was the only female CFO in the whole of my system as well. And I would feel that sometimes, had a good relationship with the rest of the CFOs, but I would be lying if I said I didn't feel that sometimes, being the only female voice in the room. So I think you're right. You do have to kind of think differently about your leadership. And I think now as kind of chief exec, as I was saying, I'm just more confident. I think that I could be my complete open self, because actually, if I was trying to be someone else all the time, it'd be so tiring that I just wouldn't be able to sustain that, I think. So I think that's the thing that I've absolutely got my head around too.
Lovely. Yeah, I think there's some interesting research about the gap between the person we present to the world and who we truly are. The bigger the gap, the more likely that we're going to fall into that, and it can be very, very difficult. Thank you, Sheila. Andy, for you, different leading as a GP, different leading as a medical director, as a man, what's your experience of? I mean, you're a multitude, but
Yeah, so I'm a white male, right? So I have lots of things to be really aware of, and I need to be really, really sensitive. And it's so easy to lead as a white man, but it is also really easy to be a cock, right? You have to be so careful of ingrained white supremacy, of misogyny, of all of the stuff that you have no idea that is just part of our culture. And you really have to do your work to be careful. And interestingly, like just in terms of this whole flow of conversation, like I really try and be authentically myself wherever I am. So my patients in my room one-to-one, when I'm with them as a doctor, or when I'm in a boardroom, or whether I'm sat with a group of, just different communities across Lancashire and South Cumbria or across the country where I work. I think for me, there is something about just being true to who you are. And so I think people would see that I'm someone who tries to live out my values kind of in every circumstance that I am, and I don't massively change. And I think that's why maybe leadership becomes possible. So I would say you don't have to wait for the leadership positions to lead. You lead from the authenticity of who you are. And actually you find that more leadership doors open as you do that, because what people are looking for, I think, is authentic leaders. So they know that the kind of leader I was in my local community is the same leader that I am now in the boardroom across the whole ICB. Yeah, so I want to say that. Can I pick up on another question very quickly in the chat that's fascinated me, Shane, which is the one about how you kind of embody or how you connect with your body in how you lead. This has become such an important question to me this last year, right? So last winter, I read this book called Wintering by Catherine May. Absolutely undid me. Like, don't read that book if you don't want your life to be changed. It was horrific. And it genuinely put me into what I would call a dark night of the soul. For the last 12 months, I have been like all over the place internally. I've had tons of therapy, really had to do my work. But that book really asked me a question, which is, why do you run so fast? What are you running from? Like, sit in the darkness and feel the pain of the thing that you're not facing. And there was some really painful stuff that I wasn't facing. But actually, my therapy has been somatic therapy. So it's all about body work. I've had to learn to get out of my head as a leader and stop being all about the new ideas and the vision and the new possibility, and learn to really, really get into my body and really listen to my body and really get much more in touch with my emotions. It's been a beautiful year of self-development, to be honest. And I want to say two things on that. One is, actually, often now when I make decisions, I don't make them from my head. I've learned to start listening to my body and my emotions in a much more interesting way. So I've had to make a really big decision about my future leadership role in our organization recently. And my coach did this brilliant thing with me where she's like, okay, we're going to put all of those decisions onto a building in Preston, like out of the window. And then I want you to notice how each of those buildings then makes you feel. And now I want you to make a body posture about how the idea of that role makes you feel. And I knew by the end of making a body posture what my decision was about my future role and where I wanted to go in the organization. It was not a head exercise at all. It was about connecting with my body and what my body was telling me. And the other thing is, like, I've taken so much more care of my body. Like in the last year, I've lost 3 stone. I swim every single day. Swimming has become the place that Brené Brown calls the gate lock for me. So before I go home after a day, I go and put all of my anxiety, all of my stuff, my stress, all the stuff I'm thinking about, it goes into the pool and I leave it there. And I come out of the pool and I go home and I can be way more present with my family and with my friends and with my community. And I think, like, learning to connect with your body and living well in our body, having embodied leadership is such an important part of what it means to lead well in our context.
Thank you very much, Andy. And of course, those of you who are familiar with the Tavistock model idea of self as instrument. So actually, how I turn up for myself, for the people I love, for the people I work with, in whatever room, I am an instrument. So wonderful. It has been amazing having you all here. I'm going to ask just one final little thing that you're taking away, and I'm going to start with Katie. We have the pleasure of sitting through this, Katie. What's the thing that you're taking away? Then I'll go to you, Andy, and I'll go to Sheila. And while we're doing that, please pop into the chat. What's the thing that you're taking away? What's the thing that you're leaving with? What's got you curious? Katie?
For me, the thing that I'm sitting with is how much leadership is a deliberate act.
Beautiful. Andy?
I think for me, leadership is about always learning. It's always learning. And that's why curiosity and humility are such fundamental foundation stones of what it means to lead well.
Thank you. And Sheila?
Yeah, I think it was fascinating for me is how similar Andy and I think about some of these things around leadership and how we're approaching it as well. But I would always say for me, it's about listening. It's a big thing about listening to kind of what your staff, etc., are telling you, because it just helps make you a better leader.
Well, that's a perfect bridge for us to say thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure listening to all three of you, and obviously particularly our guests, Sheila and Andy. I mean, it's I've been trying to listen from my heart as well as my head, but this has been it's been such a pleasure, and we appreciate you not just for being here, but for continuing to lead. I think everybody here would join us in extending the same sentiment to you both. So if you want to continue the conversation, you can either get in touch with us. You can reach out to Sheila or Andy via LinkedIn or via us. We can connect you. If you're interested in hearing more about what's going on here at Kaleidoscope, you can sign up for our newsletter or check out what's happening at our website. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate you all taking the time to be here. I hope it has led to some enlightenment and some energy. Just remember, it is challenging, and it's okay for it to feel challenging. The question is, how do we pay attention to that, and how do we respond from a position of integrity? Look up for our next one of these webinars. It's going to be on effective neighbourhood health systems, coming to a webinar near you. Just a final remember, vote Sheila for PM. Buy a copy of Andy's book. We would be very grateful if you could do both of those things. Otherwise, lead well, be well. Thank you for joining us, and look after yourselves most importantly. And we'll see you down the road.